Let's start down in the Big Easy. Ole Miss avenging its only loss of the season last night against Georgia. The Rebels climbed back from a 9-point halftime deficit behind quarterback Trinidad Chambliss, who got Ole Miss into field goal range in the final minute. Lucas Carnero booted a 47-yard field goal with 6 seconds remaining, and it marked the second straight win for Rebels coach Pete Golding, who replaced Lane Kiffin after Kiffin left for LSU. Here's the head coach of the Fiesta Bowl-bound Rebels after the game.
These guys to play the way they did and to be able to come back, in a game like that versus a team like that. They're one of the best teams in the country and one of the best coaches in the country. So, they're never scared and they don't panic. And that's what I love about this group. They don't ever get too high. They don't get too low. They want to get coached. They want to get coached hard, and they want another opportunity.
Incredible win for the Rebels on Thursday night. Cam, I start with you. From what you saw with Ole Miss, their ability to come back and win that game, can they win a national championship based on what you saw last night?
Absolutely. When you got a quarterback like Trinidad Chambliss playing out of his mind, the opportunities are limitless. You have a fearless team that are playing motivated. They're playing inspired. They're guys are taking turns making plays. And there was a moment during that game yesterday where it all looked like a repeat of the first outing, where it's like, okay, Georgia's finding a way to win this football game. And then Ole Miss and Pete Golding said to themselves, no, not today. And it was very rewarding to see a team come alive, given the circumstances that they have been faced with all year, well, in the latter part of the year, and finding ways to win. So, yes, I'm giving, Ole Miss an edge to win the college football playoffs because they have shown the grit, the determination, and the want to throughout the distractions.
Paul?
Cam, I think it's important to remember that Trinidad Chambliss was a Division II player last year, Courtney and everybody. He was not expected to do anything. He ended up on Lane Kiffin's team, and we'll get to Lane Kiffin in a minute. And he unseated Austin Simmons. And some of the plays in that game in the second half were some of the most dramatic and exciting I have ever seen. Clutch plays I've ever seen in my career. I don't know how he did it, but he willed his team to win. So they're capable. Their road is difficult, and we'll deal with that. But I can't help but think about the person sitting at an LSU women's basketball game last night, and that's Lane Kiffin. He abandoned this team because he didn't believe in them. If you had given Lane Kiffin truth serum, Cam, do you think this team can get to the third round, the semifinals of the college football playoff? He would have said, probably not. That's why I'm bailing out. I'm walking out on my team. And it is just so remarkable to see what those players have done. Pete Golding using mostly Lane Kiffin coaches who are shuttling back and forth between Baton Rouge and Oxford. It's just one of the most remarkable stories we have ever seen. It's a long shot. I think for them to get by Indiana, or even if they get by Miami, is going to be a little bit of a long shot. But the fact that we're talking about it today with only 4 schools left is remarkable.
The Ole Miss should be thanking Lane Kiffin. And they should be thanking him for so many different things. Can they win a national championship? Yes, only if Charlie Weiss Jr. continues to call plays, because in Trinidad Chambliss, you have the most dynamic football player left in the college football playoff. But Lane Kiffin set this in motion. Lane Kiffin put this team together. Lane Kiffin put this coaching staff together. And Lane Kiffin leaving made this team play with more purpose than any other team that's in the entire college football playoff. They want to show that it wasn't all about him. They want to show him that you shouldn't have left us. They want to show him that if you didn't believe in us for this year, or that if you didn't believe in this school going forward, that you were wrong. And that's the way that this team played. This wasn't about having better players than the University of Georgia. This wasn't about having a better roster. This was about Pete Golding, a former Delta State safety, looking at his team when they were down 14-12, saying, hey, man, y'all got to pick this up. After Dalen Everett picks up that fumble and scores on the scoop and score, hey, man, we got to go make plays. But also going into halftime and telling that team that you aren't the leftovers. You aren't the team that nobody wants. I want you. I want to be here. And we have an entire half to go show the entire nation that we not only belong, but that we're good enough to move on to the next round.
And we know that Pete Golding, this is his second straight win. He just took over as the head coach of the Ole Miss Rebels on November 30th. That was made official. And he's got a lot of coaches on his staff right now that are going to be going to LSU, mostly on that offensive side of the ball. So, Paul, as you look at the coaching job that Golding did in totality, keeping guys locked in when there's probably some stuff going on behind the scenes with maybe players getting recruited to LSU actively as they're trying to win a national championship for Ole Miss, do you think that Pete Golding outcoached Kirby Smart last night?
Well, I think you can say that, but Kirby Smart really beat himself. He had an inexplicable fourth down call in his own territory that really set the game in motion. I've rarely seen Kirby Smart make a miscue like that, but I think you made a great point there a minute ago. Pete Golding, this was not as difficult as I think next week will be, and I'll explain, because the transfer portal opened today. And Lane Kiffin was expecting all of those coaches who coached last night in New Orleans to travel up to Baton Rouge today. And I don't know what is going to happen. I'll defer to Ryan on that, because there is probably chaos going on right now as Ole Miss has to quickly put in a plan. They're playing next Thursday. I mean, it's game week already as this team buses back into Oxford this morning, and I don't know if they know at this hour who's going to be calling the plays next week. You'd have to think that the staff will stay intact, but how is that going to work with a lot of Lane Kiffin's coaches right now, maybe trying to recruit the roster that won the game last night? We have seen a lot of craziness in college football, but we have never seen anything that is currently going on the way it is right now. I mean, we're at the most important moment of the year, and we don't even know who's coaching next Thursday night in Arizona.
Listen, whether people want to believe this or not, but I'm going to be the one that says it. Ole Miss winning yesterday or last night was definitely not a part of the plan, including Coach Lane Kiffin. Well, Pete Golding goes out here and says, hey, let me take a team that had misfortune earlier in the season, and it came down to this, winning the fourth quarter. The first time that when Ole Miss went into Georgia, they lost the fourth quarter. They had 0 points and gave up 17 points. Yesterday, you ask yourself, why did Ole Miss win? Why did Pete Golding get his team going? It's because they scored 20 points in the fourth quarter. Why do you say that? Well, nobody was expecting Ole Miss to win. Now you have a coach divided. You have coaches that are supposed to coach on a different team still coaching in the college football playoffs, and it throws a big wrench in where we are now. What do you do? What's going to happen? And needless to say, I have this to say about any coach in college football. Everything has changed. Don't sit up here and say going to a different school will give you different opportunities, because it comes down to these three things. You have to recruit your tail off, and you have to re-recruit your tail off. And then after that, you have to develop your players. Coach Cignetti has shown that in Indiana. Coach Pete has also shown that in Ole Miss. He's getting his guys going, and he's developing his guys and finding ways to win these type of games, and that's extremely alarming for us as we sit back and watch what's going to unfold next week.
So this is what's happening. Charlie Weiss Jr. is leaving. Tight ends coach Joe Cox is leaving. Wide receiver coach George McDonald is leaving. Running back coach Kevin Smith is leaving. So all of these people are trying to figure out who will be on our roster next year at LSU, because LSU is our long-term future. But you know what leads to long-term success? Present success. Short-term success. And for Charlie Weiss Jr., who I'm sure wants to be a head coach, the further that this team goes, or the farther that this team goes in the college football playoffs, is great for him, because that says to everybody watching, oh, wait, you mean to tell me that the success of a Lane Kiffin's offense isn't totally predicated on Lane Kiffin? That Charlie Weiss Jr. is the guy that's controlling the art of play calling, the science of play calling on game day? That's good for him. It's also good for him to get the best players he could possibly get to go play at LSU. But think about what Ryan Day did in calling plays for Brian Hartline, because Brian Hartline was going to be the coach at USF. Did you see the first quarter of that game? Charlie Weis Jr. has shown he could be locked in. Lane Kiffin said he and Pete Golding have been in constant conversation about what the transition is going to be. I would hope, as Lane Kiffin is my new coach, I would hope that in this moment, he shows the integrity of letting those men finish the job that they're supposed to finish. That in this moment, he looks at those boys on the Ole Miss team and that Ole Miss roster and thinks about what they gave him. Without them playing the way that they played this year, without them buying in the way that they bought into what Lane Kiffin was preaching this year, he doesn't get the LSU job. A coach that has faltered, a coach that has failed, a coach that has had missteps, that has had to build himself back up to be the head coach at what I believe is the best university in the world. It's time for him to show integrity. It's time for them to let them finish the job that they started.
Well said. Paul?
Yeah, Ryan, I think you're right. And this is a defining moment for Lane Kiffin. It's easy to take shots at him, but let's not forget, he's the architect of what we saw last night. But if he tries to interfere now, I think it's going to be very deleterious to his present and his future, because everyone is pulling for this Ole Miss team right now. Some of it is the evil genius that is Lane Kiffin because he left, but he's going to have to allow these coaches to coach. I know he said yesterday that there's a plan in place, but there really isn't a plan in place, because I don't think even Lane Kiffin believed what was going to happen happened last night. So these next few hours are critical. Kiffin is aware. He doesn't miss programs like this, Ryan, as you well know. He knows what people are saying about him, and I hope he does it, because for him to deny Ole Miss this opportunity would be criminal.
Courtney, also really quick, I find it, and I picked Georgia, I find it astounding that nobody thought Ole Miss had the chance to win. We watched these two teams play this season. It took big plays by Georgia late in this game to come back. Georgia has played on and teetered on losing in many of the games in the SEC, Paul. And you know this. This ain't the old Georgia. And so for them to not have a plan in place, to me, is silly, knowing how closely these two teams were matched in the regular season.
Yeah, and it is important to remind people the transfer portal window does open today. It lasts for 2 weeks, January 2 through 16. It'll be very interesting to see how Ole Miss is able to handle that, how LSU and the rest of college football world factor in as well. All right, earlier in the day on New Year's Day, top-ranked Indiana took on number 9 Alabama in the Rose Bowl, and this game quickly became one-sided as Heisman Trophy winner Fernando Mendoza threw 3 touchdowns, while Indiana's defense held Alabama to just 193 total yards. IU heads to the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl after a commanding 38-3 victory. And quote, "There is no other way to slice it. This is an awful look for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama football. Losses happen through ass kickings in the CFP playoffs. For an SEC team, it's not supposed to go down this way." We'll probably hear Alabama folks saying DeBoer should have taken himself to Michigan. I mean, this is that damn bad. Paul, I know you're going to have fireworks on your show today, and I know you've been hearing about this for the last 12 or so hours. What is the state of Alabama football like this morning?
It's in shambles, and I know that sounds like a remarkable statement considering that we were in the quarterfinals yesterday and Alabama was playing in the Rose Bowl, but because it was on that stage, the grandest stage in college football, against a team that nobody from Alabama respected. And I'm not talking about Kalen DeBoer and his team. I'm talking about the fans who make up the Alabama fan base. They look at Indiana and laugh. And the problem they had is as they watched that game yesterday, that team that looked like them in color and uniform as well, looked like a Nick Saban coach team, and it was being coached by Cignetti, who is a Saban disciple. I mean, they weren't just winning the game on the scoreboard; they were beating Alabama at the line of scrimmage to a pulp. I mean, you could, if you listen closely, you could actually hear the Alabama players saying, "No more. We've had enough." I mean, they looked soft. They looked poorly coached. I mean, it was laughable. I've watched Alabama football my entire life. I mean, I started with the end of the Bear Bryant era, and even poorly coached Alabama teams have never had a display like that yesterday. So I realize Kalen DeBoer played for the SEC championship. I realize he came from 17 down. but he really wasted a lot of that good capital yesterday. And I think Alabama fans, or at least the ones I've heard from already, are irate. I'm not saying Kalen DeBoer is gone. I mean, come on. He'll probably get a contract extension because he didn't go to Michigan. But there are very few Alabama fans today who believe he can win a national championship. And as all of you know, Alabama is not judged by looking good and by winning 10 games. They are judged by national championships, and that's the concern today, that he can't do it.
Kalen, the state of Alabama football right now is realizing that all of their championship relevance relies on ghost. It relies on ghosts of people who have statues on that campus, like Wallace Wade and guys like Bear Bryant, obviously Nick Saban. This feels much like the vast land of championships from 1997 to 2006. And Paul, you've been covering them forever. Cam, you played at Auburn. You know what it was like from the time that Gene Stallings walked out of Tuscaloosa until Nick Saban came, right? They got names like DuBose and Franchione and names like Mike Shula. All of those coaches who we knew had no shot at winning a national championship. That's where this team is. The reason that we talk about Alabama is because of what Nick Saban did, but Nick Saban ain't walking through that door right now. And it's not just about the way or when Alabama doesn't win a championship. It's about the way it looks. It's about the way, how prepared are you? How do you execute? How tough is your team? How resilient is your team? How does your team respond to adversity? And when it's going bad, the thing that always happened at Alabama was the camera scanned from the field to the head coach. And the head coach always looked like he had answers when it was Nick Saban. And when Nick Saban didn't have the answer, you knew one thing: those headphones was going to fly and somebody was going to get their ass chewed out. Kalen DeBoer looked like he ain't have a clue yesterday. And that's Alabama's biggest problem right now.
Cam?
So when you start to think about, the state of Alabama, I think one thing people must understand is Nicholas Lou Saban Jr. is not coming back. And it's time for everybody to turn the page. Mm-hmm. His dominance should utterly be always appreciated, should always be looked at as a way to kind of measure certain things. But it's over. His dominance and his greatness as a coach is so great that all four head coaches that's in this year's college football semifinals had some type of stint under his coaching staff. That's Mario Cristobal. You had Dan Lanning at Oregon. You had Kurt Cignetti, obviously at Indiana, and Pete Golding at one particular point in time learned up under Coach Nick Saban. That's how great he is. It's no wonder why we look at Alabama the way we look at Alabama. It's because of the head coach, former head coach. When you look at the dynamic of what transpired yesterday, you forget that Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, TJ Yeldon, Sean Alexander, Trent Richardson, Eddie Lacy, Josh Jacobs, those guys, not to forget Jahmyr Gibbs. They did not run the football. You had a team that whooped you who ran the football 50 times. It's the optics of what people look at. And when you start to measure Alabama as a whole, let's stop comparing Kalen DeBoer to an unrealistic expectation in Nicholas Saban. Let's start to say, hey, this coach has to find his own way and his own identity. Because what we've seen in the last couple of games or throughout this past season is he gets mollywopped in the SEC championship, and the last time we saw the Alabama Crimson Tide play, he got mollywopped again with no utter sense of identity. And that's alarming, and that's something to keep an eye out on as we see Alabama moving forward.
I want to drill down on this further because you all said things that were poignant here. Paul, Alabama fans don't respect Indiana. Cam, the optics of how they lost this game. RC, the way that it looks. Stephen A., the ass kicking that we saw. Yeah. This is not just any loss, guys. This was 38-3. How bad in actuality is that part of it, the way that they lost?
Yesterday you definitely came into work with a little spunk, right? Like you had a feeling, right? But you had a feeling based on the perception of the world, not based on who Indiana was. You knew who Indiana was, right? You knew how physical they were. You knew how well coached they were. But everybody in Alabama, everybody in Louisiana, everybody in Georgia, and we all know this, Paul, we know this, Cam, we feel like football was invented in the South. And because it was invented in the South, and because it's the way we all wake up on every Saturday, on every Friday, on every Sunday, we think that we own it. So when Curt Cignetti walks in with these guys from Indiana, we thought to ourselves, oh, wait, there's no way they're going to define what football is in college now. But they did. And they did it against Alabama. And for whatever reason, or for whatever you think, for the last 2 decades, Alabama defined what football looked like. If you beat Alabama, you were now considered a good team. You were now considered a university and a program that was respectable. That wasn't a beating. That was an ass whipping. That was something you don't come back from. That was something that changes programs, and it's changed Indiana. And I know Alabama fans now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this team is not ready to compete for a championship.
No, I mean, I think the realization of where we are in college football should be highlighted on the coaches, like I mentioned, that can recruit and that can develop. When you look at Kalen DeBoer, he has arguably one of the most dynamic players that we all thought was supposed to have even more of a breakout season in his receiver, where it's like, what happened to him? He did not get better. He got worse. You start to see a team diminishing and deteriorate during the latter part of the season or the latter part of games, and it's like, yo, we're not used to seeing that. Yesterday's game, you were outgained by 214 yards. We're never used to seeing that. In no SEC type of dynamic. We look at Indiana, first off, Indiana's first win in God knows how long in a playoff setting, let alone in a bowl game, and you lose to that? It's different. Why? Because you have the transfer portal. Why? Because you have NIL. Right? Why? You have so many different determining factors that you have to say, hey, let's get back to the nuts and bolts. And does our coach recruit? And does our coach develop? And from what we've seen this year, Coach Kalen DeBoer needs to get on back to the basics and find ways to get his roster better, because everybody has caught up to the train of what Alabama has been dominant at for a long time.
And Cam, finally, one thing Alabama used to do, and I say used to do in past tense, they used to often win because of who they were. They were like Tiger Woods on the first tee in the final round of a major. They intimidated you. They don't intimidate anyone anymore, and that's really the sad part of this 2-year Kalen DeBoer experiment. The mystique is gone. The dynasty is over. If an Alabama fan tries to call up and say, we're a dynastic program, I mean, they'll be laughed off the stage. And I don't know what Kalen DeBoer can say about that, because he's a good football coach, but he's not a dynamic, charismatic character. And Curt Cignetti just made him look like a fool yesterday. And if you had hired Curt Cignetti 2 years ago instead of Kalen DeBoer, Alabama fans would have rioted. And today they're texting me saying, can we get Curt Cignetti down here? No, you can't. He's just signed a lifetime contract. You have Kalen DeBoer, and you're stuck with him.
The reason I love doing the show with you guys is because you bring up the history element. You obviously know the game so well. Cam, you list off the litany of running backs. 23 rushing yards yesterday for the Alabama Crimson Tide.